Rain had rinsed the red earth clean that evening, leaving the air cool and smelling of hibiscus. Lanterns swayed on strings across the Castell Market Road, and drums thumped like a second heartbeat as the village escorted Nkairu and Chinedu from the church. She wore a simple white lace, the kind that catches moonlight and turns it into quiet bravery. He held her hand with a proud smile that looked like a vow. Inside the small compound house, cousins cleared plates, aunties hummed, and the last guests drifted out in laughter. In the hush after celebration, Chinedu closed the door to their new room, the scent of palm oil and rain still clinging to the curtains. He took her hands. "I will choose you," he said, voice steady. "Not just today. Every day. Even when the road is muddy." She searched his face, this man with gentle eyes and calloused hands from his carpentry, then nodded. "And I will carry your name like a blessing," she whispered. "No matter who tries to stain it." They prayed, not long, just enough to say, "God, see us." When they rose, the smile reached his eyes again. But outside the thin wall, a voice threaded through the night, Mama Grace, his mother, speaking to Auntie Efima. "He has tied himself to a basket that will never hold water," she murmured. "A beauty on the surface, emptiness beneath. She will not give him a child." Nkairu heard the words as a shiver more than a sentence. She could pretend it was wind, a lizard skittering on the wall, anything, except that her husband's mother had always watched her like a judge at a quiet trial. Later, when the lamps were out, Nkairu lay with her head on Chinedu's shoulder. "Your mother loves you," she said carefully. "I know," he replied. "But love can be loud and wrong at the same time." He kissed her hair and drew her closer. "Sleep. Tomorrow we start the life we promised." Outside, the night resumed its soft chorus, but the first shadow had already crossed the floor. The months slipped like beads off a string. When Nkairu first missed her flow, relief poured through her like morning sun. By the third missed month, the aunties started sending soups. By the sixth, she moved slowly, a hand always at her lower belly. By the ninth, celebration drums were being tuned. But time, tricky and stubborn, kept walking past all the old markers. The belly grew, and then it simply stayed, a taut moon refusing to wane. 1 year. Then 2. By the third year, whispers ripened and fell, heavy as pawpaws. "Abeg, something is not right," a neighbor muttered at the borehole, eyeing Kairu's side profile as water splashed into yellow jerrycans. 9 months is 9 months. Whatever is this? Another voice. "My mother said some women can swallow spirits, the belly stays but nothing comes out." Laughter, thin and mean. Inside the house, Nkairu folded baby clothes she had sewn herself. Tiny neck holes, neat hems. She smoothed each one as if calming a child that had not yet cried. In the mirror, her eyes remained bright, determined. When fear tried to chew at her heart, she prayed. "God that opened Sarah's womb," she whispered, pressing her palm to her belly. "Breathe for my baby. Keep us." Chinedu came home later, dust in his hair, measuring tapes looped across his shoulder. He crouched to her belly, speaking softly, "My little lion, I'm building your crib myself, do you hear? No one else's hands." She smiled, and for a moment both of them felt safe. But Mama Grace's eyes were flint. 3 years of shame, she hissed to Chinedu when they were alone, the way a match head speaks before it burns. "Open your eyes. This girl tied your destiny into a knot. A woman carrying a child in her belly like a suitcase. Who has seen that?" "Mama," he said, tired. "Doctors said the baby is there. They said, it is complicated." "Doctors," she scoffed. "Men who speak in circles so they can collect money. Complicated? Which goat ever carried pregnancy for 3 yam harvests? Something is hiding in that belly." That night, when Kairu tried to show Chinedu another tiny cap she had knitted, he smiled, but it didn't reach all the way. The promise from their wedding night stood trembling on thin legs, asking for help. Mockery does not always arrive as a shout. Sometimes it is a sigh at the doorway, a clatter of spoons dropped just too hard, an exaggerated sniff over soup. Mama Grace weaponized the ordinary. "Pepper again," she would say, lifting a lid with 2 fingers. "Are you feeding a child or burning the house?" She would click her tongue and scrape the stew with a spoon like an inspector. Maybe this is why the child is refusing to come. Even in the belly it is running from your food. Nkairu would breathe in through her nose, out through her mouth. She had learned that steady breath is a kind of shield. Mama, let me make you okro tomorrow, she would offer. Soft, the way you like it. I like children more than okro, came the reply, sharp and dry. In the evening, Mama Grace would sit on the wooden bench by the gate and conduct an audience. She will not even listen, she told the neighbors. I told her, go and cleanse. She said prayer is enough. Prayer is enough. When you are carrying a masquerade in your stomach. Nkairu's friend Adiz tried to throw sunlight into the shadows. Ignore her, Adiz said, squeezing Nkairu's hand as they walked to the market. People will always talk. When your child cries for the first time, their mouths will close like shutters. I know, Nkairu said, but the words got stuck in her throat because, at that exact moment, a group of women passed, their laughter trailing. One cupped her mouth and called, Auntie 9 months that refuses to finish. How market? More laughter. Nkairu stopped. Pain arrived like a hot wave, then cooled into anger. She turned to them. I am not your proverb, she said, voice steady. I am a woman standing, one who knows her God. For a heartbeat, the street went quiet. Then an older woman cleared her throat. We are joking, oh, she said, palms up in mock surrender, the words greased with cruelty. That night, Mama Grace knocked on their door without waiting for an answer. I warned you to keep a low profile, she scolded. Now you are talking back to elders in the market. Witchcraft always grows a sharp tongue before it flies. Chinidu's jaw tightened. Mama, Biko. Biko what? She flared. Choose sense. This girl has coated your ears with honey. Nkairu stood, cradling her belly as if it might shiver. Mama, I will not fight you, she said softly. But please, stop calling me what I am not. Then show us what you are, Mama Grace snapped, and left. When the door clicked shut, Chinidu leaned against it and closed his eyes, the wood bearing the weight of his confusion. Sleep became a thin blanket for Chinidu, never quite enough to cover the cold questions. He loved his wife. That was not in dispute. He loved the way she hummed while mending, how her laugh sounded like a glass of water after a long day, how she remembered his mother's medicine even when Mama Grace forgot. But love started wrestling with doubt in the quiet hours, and doubt, patient and tireless, knew how to jab. One afternoon in his workshop, his friend Obinna planed a board and spoke without looking up. Your mother came to my shop. She said you are putting your head in a bag. Chinidu, this thing is becoming talk in the whole market. Chinidu's hand slowed. What should I do, Obinna? Throw my wife out because the calendar refuses to obey. The baby is there. We have felt the kick. Obinna nodded, mouth a straight line. Then hold your ground. Before talk turns into decisions you didn't make. That evening, Mama Grace cornered him beside the mango tree. Listen to me as if I am your mother, she said ironically, then softened her tone like a net. I have made inquiries. There are herbs, small cleansing. Nobody needs to know. We bring her down to normal size and start again. Fresh. Mama, he said slowly, my wife is not a pot to be scrubbed. She exhaled, patience evaporating. You will watch your name fade while you speak grammar. A man who keeps quiet while his lineage drowns is not a man. At night, Chinidu sat awake, the fan ticking overhead like a lazy clock. In the bed beside him, Nkairu's breath was even. He placed a palm on the swell of her belly. Father, give me a spine, he prayed. Not just to stand with my wife, but to stand between her and this storm. As if hearing him, the baby rolled under his hand. He smiled into the dark, sudden tears brightening his eyes. I felt that, he whispered. Nkairu stirred, half asleep. Our lion, she murmured. Our lion, he agreed. But when he closed his eyes, his mother's words threaded back through the dark, stubborn as smoke. Market day arrived like a festival and a trial. The sun was kind at first, then grew bold. Color spilled everywhere, red peppers, green plantains. yellow Gary mounded like sandcastles. Nkairu carried her basket and walked with ease, head high, back straight. If she was trembling, only her bones knew it. They stopped at Mama Igioma's stall for smoked fish. "Ah, my daughters," Mama Igioma sang, fanning the flies away. "Sweetness has reached my table." She looked at Nkairu's belly and clucked. "The day you bring that child to me, I will put palm oil in their palm to bless their tongue." "Thank you, Mama," Nkairu said, gratitude prickling her eyes. But shadows travel fast. Across the aisle, a group of women arranged tomatoes like little red accusations. One tilted her head. "See her," she said, voice pitched to carry. "Still packing the same load." Another chimed in, "Maybe it is not child. Maybe she swallowed a calabash." Laughter. Sharp. Practiced. Nkairu exhaled. "At ease, let's go." They moved, but the gossipers followed with their eyes, the way hawks track guinea fowl. Near the fabric stall, a teen boy raised his phone, smirking, ready to trap someone else's pain inside a rectangle. "Hey!" Adiz snapped, stepping toward him. "Delete that before I break it." The boy flinched, lowered the phone. The women tittered. "Anger," one said. Another sign. An orange rolled off a stacked pyramid and bounced to Nkairu's feet. She picked it up and placed it back carefully. When she straightened, Mama Grace stood across from her, arms folded, face like a closed door. "So this is where you spend my son's name," Mama Grace announced, eyes sweeping the crowd that had gathered the way people always gather, happily, for a spectacle. "Parading a lie. 3 years of deception. Tell them what you tied around your waist. Tell them who gave you the charm." A ripple went through the market. Someone whispered, "Mama Grace, fear God." But more voices leaned forward to hear better. Nkairu felt heat rise in her neck. Beside her, Adiz tensed like a drawn bow. "Don't," Nkairu murmured. She stepped forward, belly first, hands steady at her sides. "Mama," she said, voice even but ringing. "I'm carrying your grandchild. I have not used charm. I have used prayer. If you will not stand with me, at least do not push me." Mama Grace's laugh was not laughter. "Grandchild," she said, turning to the onlookers. "If a goat climbs your roof and refuses to come down, is it a guest or a problem? I am saving my son from disgrace." A hand touched Nkairu's elbow, Mama Igioma, her eyes fierce. "Enough," the older woman said to Mama Grace. "We are mothers. We should pull daughters in, not tear them in the square." Mama Grace bristled. "When it is your son's name on the chopping block, you can preach." Chinedu arrived then, moving fast, sawdust still clinging to his shirt. He had gotten the message. Someone ran to his workshop. "They are dragging your wife at the market." He looked from his mother to his wife, to the circle of faces, to the boy's half-hidden phone. "Stop this," he said, voice low but carrying. "All of you. Stop looking at my wife like a show." He moved to Nkairu's side and took her hand in plain sight. Gasps fluttered. Mama Grace's mouth thinned. "You choose her against your blood." "I choose truth," he replied, eyes steady. "And my truth is here." He raised their joined hands. A murmur moved through the crowd, approval here, skepticism there, and something new, the beginning of a divide. Some women looked down, ashamed of their laughter. Others rolled their eyes, already rehearsing tomorrow's version of the story. As they walked away, Nkairu's legs felt heavy, but her spine felt taller. The market noise faded behind them, replaced by the slap of their sandals on the hot earth. "Thank you," she said, not trusting herself with more. "I should have been here sooner," he answered. "I will do better." From behind, Mama Grace's voice soared one last time. "This is not finished," she called. "You will see." Nkairu did not turn. She pressed his hand and whispered, "Let God see us first." And as they reached the bend in the road, a quiet breeze lifted the dust and wrapped them both, as if the afternoon itself had decided to stand between them and the world. Morning swept through the compound in a quiet blue. Nkairu washed millet in a bowl while the rooster rehearsed a crow. Mama Grace moved like a shadow in the kitchen, knife, chopping board, a small calabash tucked under her wrapper. When she thought no one was looking, she tapped a brownish powder into a steaming pot and stirred with brisk, guilty turns. "Let me finish that," Nkairu offered, stepping in with her slow, careful gait. "No, no," Mama Grace said too quickly, switching the ladle to her other hand. "You should rest. A woman carrying this long must not strain." She forced a smile that tasted of iron. "Go and sit." Nkairu sat, but her eyes drifted to the pot. The aroma was familiar, ugu and smoked fish, but an undertone stung her nose like old medicine. When the food was served, Mama Grace made sure to dish Nkairu's plate from the bottom of the pot. "Eat well," she urged. "Hot food strengthens the bones." Nkairu lifted a spoonful. The bitterness spread across her tongue and crawled down her throat. She swallowed, willing her face to stay calm. "It's strong," she said. "Strong is good," Mama Grace replied. "Weakness has wasted enough time here." By noon, a dull ache coiled around Nkairu's abdomen. She pressed her palms to her sides and breathed. The baby rolled sluggishly, as if tugged by sleepy hands. Adiz arrived with mangoes and narrowed her eyes at the untouched bowl. "You didn't eat." "I did," Nkairu said, voice thin. "It tasted strange." Adiz dipped the spoon, sniffed, and frowned. "This is not only ugu. What did she add?" "I don't know," Nkairu said, lifting her chin as a wave of discomfort tightened and released. "I will be fine." That evening, Mama Grace knelt by her bed with a silkiness that made the room colder. "I found cleansing herbs from a trusted hand," she whispered. "Women have used them for generations. We only want what is right." "What is right," Nkairu replied softly, "cannot be forced through a back door." "You have tied my son's name to a rumor," Mama Grace hissed, the silk tearing. "If I must untie it with my own hands, I will." When she left, Adiz leaned close. "Don't eat her food alone again," she warned. "We will cook together." Nkairu nodded, and the ache deepened, as if the words had weight inside her. Rain returned without ceremony, rattling the zinc roof and washing heat off the earth. As dusk fell, the ache sharpened into a blade that twisted with every breath. Nkairu tried to stand and the room tilted. She clutched the bedpost. Sweat traced her spine. "Chinidu," she called, but thunder swallowed his name. Adiz rushed in at her cry. "Hey! Sit," she said, catching Nkairu under the arms. Another stab of pain folded Nkairu in half. The baby moved, once, twice, then went still like a bird hiding in tall grass. "Mama!" Adiz shouted. "Come!" Mama Grace arrived, eyed the scene, and crossed herself with a flourish. "God forbid," she muttered, then louder. "What did I say? Demons do not leave quietly." "Demons!" Adiz snapped. "She is in pain." Neighbors gathered in the doorway like moths to a lamp. The rain, the whispers, the half-seen faces, everything pressed in. Chinidu burst through the crowd, soaked and trembling. "What happened?" Nkairu reached for him, but another spasm tore a gasp from her throat. Mama Grace seized her moment. "I warned you," she said to her son, voice rising. "Something is inside her that is not child. I told you she needed cleansing. You refused. Now see." "Stop," Chinidu said, but fear had already laid a hand on his shoulder. He looked from his mother's hard certainty to his wife's contorted face and felt the world tilt. "Nkairu," he whispered, "tell me the truth. Did you do anything? Did anyone give you something?" Pain makes even love stagger. For a heartbeat, anger flashed across Nkairu's face. "After everything, this is your question?" And then it broke into hurt. "I have only prayed," she said, breath hitching. "Only prayed." Another wave crashed through her. Adiz's eyes blazed. "We need a midwife. Now." "I will fetch Aya Ozyama," a neighbor offered, already sprinting into the wet night. While they waited, Mama Grace mixed something in a cup. "Drink this," she ordered. "It will flush." Adiz slapped the cup away. "Are you mad?" "Enough." Chinidu shouted, voice cracking. Silence swallowed the room except for the rain. He knelt, took Nkairu's clammy hand, and pressed it to his lips. Forgive me, he whispered, to her, to God, to the frightened boy inside him. Hold on. Help is coming. Nkairu nodded once, biting her lip as the storm inside her fought the storm outside. Somewhere between the thunder and her own pulse, a small rhythm answered from deep within, faint, but alive. By lantern light, Aya Ozyamar looked like a story carved out of wood, cheekbones sharp, eyes bright as palm oil. She entered without ceremony, washed her hands in a bowl, and sent everyone to the edges of the room with a glance. You, she told Chinedu, hold the lamp steady. You, she told Adiz, boil water. Mama Grace, sit. The last was not a request. The old woman didn't look at the calabash stains on the cooking spoon, didn't ask why a bitterness lingered in the air, her nose told her enough. She pressed her ear to Nkairu's belly, hummed low, and moved her hands with the patience of someone who had caught babies from women who had only hope and breath left to give. She said at last. Your child is not lost. He is lying across you like a stubborn prince, sideways, not ready to greet the door. A tremor of relief shook Nkairu. Alive, she breathed. Alive, Aya Ozyamar confirmed. But troubled. And you, she added, aiming her gaze at Mama Grace, have been feeding this mother things that make the womb angry. Stop. Mama Grace's mouth snapped open. Are you calling me a... I am calling you a mother, the midwife cut in. And asking you to act like one. She turned to the bed. We will coax this child to turn, small. She guided Nkairu's breathing, eased her to her side, supported her belly with a folded cloth. Talk to him, she murmured. Tell him the path is safe. Nkairu laid a hand on her skin. My lion, she whispered, voice steadying. It is your mother. Come to me. I am ready. The room softened. Even the rain seemed to listen. A minute passed. 2. Then, under the midwife's sure hands, a subtle shift happened, like a boat adjusting its keel. Nkairu gasped. He moved. Aha, Aya Ozyamar smiled, small and satisfied. He hears you. She brewed a simple tea, ginger, warm water, and handed the cup to Nkairu, ignoring the glare from Mama Grace. You will rest, she instructed. You will not eat anything unless it comes from your own hands or those who love you. And you, she told Chinedu, turning his face toward hers, you will build a fence with your words. This house needs protection. When the midwife left, the lantern flame danced as if agreeing. Chinedu sat on the edge of the bed, relief and shame warring inside him. I doubted you, he said hoarsely. You were afraid, Nkairu replied. Fear makes noise. Love makes work. She reached for his hand. He held on, wondering how many times he could say I'm sorry before it sounded like rain on a metal roof, loud but useless. Outside the door, Mama Grace stood very still, the midwife's sentence, act like a mother, circling her like a hawk. Peace lasted 3 days. On the 4th, gossip sharpened its teeth again. The midwife said the child is sideways, someone announced. Sideways. In the 4th year. Let me laugh. Mama Grace decided she would finish what she started. She caught Nkairu alone near the gate, seized her wrist with surprising strength, and dragged. Come, she barked. Let the market see the truth. Mama, stop, Nkairu protested, stumbling as the weight of her belly fought the pull. You will hurt me. What you carry has been hurting us, Mama Grace shot back. Today, we end it. In the square, a knot of women formed like a storm cloud. Merchants paused mid-sale, a bead of silence threaded through chatter. Mama Grace lifted Nkairu's arm like a referee. This girl has tied my son's life with juju, she proclaimed. If not, why is the child refusing to come? Bring water. Salt. We will wash her waist and see what falls. A bucket appeared. There is always a bucket when drama calls. Mama Grace reached to untie Nkairu's wrapper. Nkairu slapped her hand away, outrage flaring. What are you doing? Exposing a lie, Mama Grace snapped. She grabbed again. The wrapper slipped an inch. Gasps. A phone rose, lens hungry. For a second, shame punched the air out of Nkairu's lungs. Then Mama Ijeoma stepped between them, eyes blazing. Tufia, she spat. Have you lost your mind? She yanked the bucket away and planted her small body like a tree. If your son has no spine, I will lend him mine. You will not strip a woman in the market to feed your pride. Move, Mama Grace warned. Before I forget your grey hair. Forget it, Mama Ijeoma said. Collect sense instead. Adiz arrived, breathless, and wrapped her shawl around Nkairu. We're going, she said. Now. But the crowd, scented with spectacle, demanded a show. Let us see, someone shouted. If she is clean, she should submit to washing. Will you strip your daughter to please strangers? Adiz fired back. Shame on all of you. Nkairu straightened, palms on her belly, voice calm and ringing. I am a woman, not a rumor, she said. I am carrying life, not darkness. If you are mothers, you know this pain. If you are human, you know this dignity. Silence flickered, fragile and brief. Then a young man snickered. The spell broke. Murmurs resumed. Chinedu pushed through at last, face carved by panic and fury. He took in the scene, the bucket, the phones, his mother's hand on Kairu's wrapper, and something inside him snapped a wire. Enough, he thundered. People startled. If any of you touch my wife again, God be my witness, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. He wrapped his arm around Nkairu and steered her away. Mama Grace stood trembling, pride and fear dueling under her skin. As they left, Mama Ijeoma faced the crowd. One day, she said, voice like a slap, you will pray for mercy with the same mouths you used for mockery. At home, Nkairu collapsed into a chair, shaking. Chinedu knelt in front of her. I failed you, he said. I should have been there before it started. You got there, she whispered, a small smile cracking through the hurt. That is the part one will remember. In the doorway, Mama Grace hovered like a shadow she couldn't swallow. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. Night laid its heavy hand on the compound. Crickets sang. In the kitchen, Chinedu found the wooden spoon with a faint brown stain along the edge. He rubbed it with his thumb and something old and bitter rose to his tongue, remembrance, regret. He set the spoon down as if it might burn him. Obinna knocked softly and slipped in. I heard, he said. The whole market heard. Are you okay? Chinedu's laugh scraped his throat. Is that a real question? Obinna leaned on the doorframe. What will you do? What I should have done from the beginning, Chinedu said, too quickly, as if speed could anchor him. But even as he spoke, a quieter voice in him whispered all the fears. What if the child never comes? What if the village is right? What if your name withers while you pretend to be strong? Obinna watched the war on his friend's face. Doubt does not mean you have no faith, he said. It means you are human. But pick your side before someone else picks it for you. Later, Chinedu sat on the edge of the bed, watching Kairu sleep. The lantern traced soft light over her cheekbones. She looked younger, almost like the girl from their wedding night who believed love could hold a roof up by itself. He placed a hand on her belly. A heel, or elbow, nudged his palm. Alive. He exhaled, relief punching a hole through the fog. The door creaked. Mama Grace slipped in, her voice papery. My son. He didn't look at her. She came closer. The word tangled. She tried again, stubborn. I did what I did for you. A mother must protect her house. Protect, he repeated, tasting the word as if it were strange. By dragging my wife into the market. By poisoning her food. Her eyes flashed. Poison. You call medicine poison. I call anything that hurts her poison, he said, finally meeting her gaze. The room shrank to the space between their eyes. You taught me to be a man, Mama. But a man who cannot cover his wife is still a boy. Silence yawned. For a moment, grief flickered across Mama Grace's face. Grief for lost control, lost certainty, lost reputation, and then hardened again. If you choose her against me, she whispered, you will regret. Chinedu's resolve wobbled. The boy in him reached for the comfort of his mother's once warm lap, the old stories, the unquestioned rightness of her voice. The man in him remembered the midwife's instruction, build a fence, and the feel of his child nudging his palm. Between those two, he hovered, guilt nesting inside his ribs. When Mama Grace left, the room breathed again. Chinedu lowered his forehead to Nkairu's belly. "I am trying," he whispered to the child, to the woman, to himself. "I am trying to be the kind of man you will not be ashamed to call father." On the table, the stained spoon lay like a small verdict. He picked it up, walked outside, and buried it under the mango tree. It wasn't a solution, only a line in the sand a trembling man dared to draw. Inside, Nkairu stirred and murmured in her sleep, "Our lion." "Soon," Chinedu said to the night, to the storm that hadn't finished with them. "Soon." The compound slept, but the night was wide awake. A thin moon hung above the mango tree, and the zinc roof ticked, cooling after a hot day. Nkairu lay on her side, one hand to her belly, the other tucked beneath her cheek, when voices slipped through the window like restless lizards. "Enough softness," Mama Grace hissed from the veranda. "Tomorrow we finish it. I'll call the elders and the women's fellowship. She will go back to her father's house before sundown." Auntie Efima's whisper fluttered. "Are you sure? The boy loves her." "Love is a candle," Mama Grace snapped. "It melts. A name is a wall. I will not watch mine crumble. We say she bewitched him. How else did he raise his voice at me in the market?" Under the mosquito net, Nkairu's eyes flashed open. The baby rolled once, twice, as if listening too. She slid out of bed with care and padded to the door. Chinedu slept on, his breath steady. The day had beaten him into an honest, heavy rest. "Tomorrow," Efima murmured. "I will make a scene that even heaven must watch," Mama Grace vowed. "Let me slap the scales off her face so her lies fall." "Don't let it turn ugly," Efima warned. "It's already ugly," Mama Grace replied. "Let me make it truthful." Nkairu caught herself gripping the doorframe so hard her knuckles whitened. Rage rose, the raw kind that smells of metal, then steadied into resolve. She lifted the net, woke Chinedu with a firm shake. "Wake up." He blinked. "What is it?" She pointed toward the veranda. The hushed voices went on, like a fire being fed. "Your mother plans to chase me out tomorrow, with the elders watching." Sleep fell from him like a dropped cloth. He listened. The words on the veranda were low now, but the intention in them beat like a drumskin. He stood, jaw hardening. "She won't," he said. "Words are not fences," Nkairu replied. "We need to build today, before tomorrow steps in as a judge." He took her hands. "I will put my body in the doorway if I must." She searched his face. "Then stand in it today, before the crowd forms." He nodded, pulled on a shirt, and stepped into the night. "Mama," he called softly. The voices broke apart. Mama Grace materialized from the shadows, head wrap erect like a crown. "You should be asleep," she said. "So should your anger," he answered. "But it seems to roam." They stared at each other, mother and son, tied by blood and tearing by pride. "I heard your plan," he continued. "There will be no elders and no scene. If you want to talk, talk to me, not to the village." "Talk has finished," she shot back. "This house is drowning and you are clutching a stone." He swallowed. "Then let me drown with the woman I vowed to love." A flicker, hurt, crossed her face and was gone. "So that is your answer." "That is my fence," he said quietly, and stayed on the veranda long after she had gone to her room, the night wind working like prayer across his skin. Inside, Nkairu exhaled, slow. The baby nudged her palm. "We are not leaves," she whispered. "We will not be blown away." Morning came bright and vicious. The sun walked on the compound early, as if eager for gossip. Nkairu, wrapped in a plain wrapper and a calm she had to keep feeding, carried a small basin to the front step to peel yam. Children's voices bubbled in the lane, a radio argued somewhere about politics. The ordinary day tried to repeat itself. Mama Grace swept the yard with militant strokes. When her broom neared Nkairu's feet, she hissed, "Shift." Nkairu shifted. The broom scraped again. "I said shift." Mama Grace barked, loud enough for passing ears. Heads turned. The familiar hunger for spectacle sniffed the air. I have shifted, Mama, Nkairu replied evenly, moving farther. There is space enough for both of us. Not for lies, Mama Grace said, planting the broom and lifting her chin. Not for a woman who eats my food and feeds my son shame. Stop, came Chinidu's warning through the doorway. But shame, for an old hurt, for a market scene that had not gone her way, pushed Mama Grace from behind. She stepped close enough for Nkairu to smell mint leaves on her breath, and spat, "You will never bear fruit." The words fell like stones. Somewhere in Nkairu, something snapped, but she did not raise her voice. "Do not curse yourself with your own mouth," she said. "Life is listening." Perhaps it was the stillness in Nkairu's tone, the audacity that a younger woman could sound like a mother. Perhaps it was the audience. Two neighbors paused at the gate. Whatever the spark, Mama Grace's palm rose before reason could catch it. The slap cracked across the morning. The basin jolted from Nkairu's hands. Yam tumbled, white coins spinning on dust. A tiny, collective inhale ran through the onlookers. Chinidu was there in 2 strides, catching Nkairu by the elbow, his face gone white with something colder than fury. "Mama," he said, voice low and shaking, "no more." Mama Grace froze, shocked at her own hand as if it had acted without permission. Shame flashed, quickly masked by a glare. "She." "No more," he repeated. "I beg you." Neighbors drifted on with the slow disappointment of people denied a second episode. The compound went quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet, the kind a room has after a plate shatters. Nkairu touched her cheek. It burned, but not as much as the memory would. She gathered the yams without a word and took them inside. Chinidu followed, silent. Under the zinc's hum, something dark moved into place, like a cloud building on a far horizon. By afternoon, the sky pressed hot and low. The kitchen's air wore steam like a scarf. Nkairu stood at the stove, turning yam slices in a pot with long tongs, the water bubbling with a steady, urgent sound. Adiz sat on a stool, plucking scent leaves, every so often glancing toward the doorway. "Do you want me to stay the night?" she asked. "You've done enough," Nkairu said, managing a smile. "Go and rest. I will manage." They heard the yard gate click. Mama Grace's voice floated in, brittle. "I have returned for my wrapper." Her steps marched across the veranda and into the kitchen without knocking. She scanned the steaming pot, the neat counter, the careful order. Her mouth twisted. "Preparing feast for your invisible child." Adiz's head rose. "Mama." "I'm talking to my daughter-in-law," Mama Grace snapped. "If the title still fits." Nkairu put down the tongs, wiped her hands, and faced her. "Please, let us keep peace." "Peace? After you made my son bury his head in sand? After you made the market laugh at me?" Mama Grace moved closer, words quickening. "You trapped him. You trapped all of us." "I trapped no one," Nkairu said, voice held in 2 steady hands. "I'm carrying your grandchild." "Lie." The word hit the wall and came back sharper. "If you were carrying anything good, it would have come to light. Darkness loves darkness." Adiz stood. "Enough." Nkairu, step back. Perhaps it was the slap in the morning still echoing, perhaps the fear in Mama Grace finally finding a target to claw, but she leaned forward and jabbed a finger toward Nkairu's face. "Open your eyes. Release my son." The finger was too close, the kitchen too small, the day too long. Nkairu flinched, not from the finger, but from the sudden memory of a girlhood when she had learned to swallow pain to be polite. Chinidu entered in that instant. He took in the room, the boiling pot, the rigid backs, the way Adiz held herself like a door, and something within him, strung too tight for too long, thrummed out of tune. "Mama," he said carefully, "leave our house." "Your house." The scoff was pure iron. "I built you. I carried you. I will not be thrown out by a stranger you met 5 rains ago." "I said leave," he repeated, voice dropping. "Or what?" Her eyes flared. "Will you throw me out? Will you pour your anger on me the way she has poured shame on you?" The pot hissed. Steam licked the ceiling. Chinidu's gaze fell there, to the water, to the small, scorching certainty of it, and the pressure inside him. So many months of mockery, the market scene, the slap, the midnight plotting, the spoon buried under the mango tree, jumped its track. He moved in a blur, tongs down, hand to handle, a hard, reckless lift. Adiz shouted, "Chinidu, no!" He swung. The metal trembled in his grip. In a breath, a single, terrible beat, he changed the arc. The steaming water flew not toward Nkairu but toward the space between him and his mother, a scalding curtain meant to end a war with an ugly, final period. It was a choice snapped in anger, not sharpened by wisdom. The water flashed. The room screamed. Mama Grace jerked back, but not far enough. Heat kissed her forearm, leapt to her shoulder, stung her neck. The pot clanged empty onto the stove. For a heartbeat, silence stood shocked and naked. Then Mama Grace's cry broke it, raw as torn cloth. Chinidu stared, horror rising like floodwater. "Mama," he gasped. The pot's handle fell from his hand and hit the floor with a little, disloyal sound. The scream ran ahead of the news. Neighbors appeared, faces painted with alarm. Someone shouted for water, someone else, for Aya Ozyama. The world condensed to a single room. Adiz snagged a bowl, splashed cool water, not on the injury, but near, trying to lower the heat in the air, to create calm where panic thundered. Nkairu moved on instinct, sheet off the bed, door thrown wide, a clear space made. "Mama, sit," she urged, voice taut but steady. Mama Grace sat, shaking, breath coming in startled sobs. Shock blurred her pupils, anger tried to stand and fell back, stunned. Chinidu hovered, white as chalk, hands lifted and useless, as if they belonged to someone else. "I'm sorry," he said, and the words were so small, so soft, the room almost didn't hear them. Aya Ozyama arrived, the lantern of her presence turning chaos into order. "Space," she said, and space opened. She knelt, her hands moving like memory, efficient, gentle. She spoke to Mama Grace in a cooing rhythm that anchored the older woman's breathing. To Adiz, "Fetch cloth." To Nkairu, "Stay with me." To Chinidu, finally meeting his shattered eyes, "Stand there and be still." "I didn't," Chinidu started. "Be still," she repeated, not unkindly. The midwife's voice was a road everyone followed. The trembling steadied. The world widened by an inch. In that inch, truth stood up. Chinidu had tried to stop a cycle with a flash of violence and had only birthed another kind of pain. From the courtyard, whispers gathered like rain clouds. He poured it on his own mother. "Ah, she warned us, witchcraft." Or maybe he finally chose his wife. Chai. The devil dances in daylight. Inside, Mama Grace's sobs thinned to ragged breaths. She would carry marks of pain, of a son's terrible choice, but she was alive. Nkairu swayed. Adiz caught her elbow. "Sit," Adiz whispered. "You have stood long enough." Chinidu backed into a corner and slid down the wall until he sat on the floor, his hands over his face. His body shook once, twice, like a house after thunder. "Look at me," Aya Ozyama said, not to scold but to gather him. He lifted his head. "A line has been crossed," she said. "Now we choose the next line. You will not run. You will answer. And you will cover your wife with your body and your mother with your remorse." His lips trembled. "I will." Nkairu turned toward him. The room seemed to tremble on a wire between past and future. She learned something about herself then. How love could ache and still refuse to break. "We will tell the truth," she said. "All of it." Outside, the night came earlier than it should, the kind of night that sits on a village like a verdict. By dawn, the story wore several coats and none of them fit. At the borehole, he boiled a pot and chased his mother with it. At the junction, the wife bewitched him to turn his hand against blood. At the palm wine shed, maybe he finally grew teeth. A man must choose his home. Men debated with hard voices, women with weary ones. Old grudges were stitched into new argument. Some clucked tongues at Nkairu as she passed with Adiz to buy bread. Others pressed small gifts into her palm, eggs, Gary, as if to say we see you. A boy started to raise his phone, His uncle slapped it down. Not today. At the elders' square, the council gathered under the almond tree. Chinedu stood with shoulders squared and eyes red, a humility around him like a simple shirt. Beside him, Nkairu's wrapper was neat, her cheek still tender, her hand steady. Mama Grace sat with a scarf covering her shoulder, chin lifted, eyes a storm in their own right. The oldest elder, a man with a walking stick polished by decades of worry, cleared his throat. We have heard too much. Let us hear from the people who were there. Chinedu spoke first, voice scraped clean of excuses. He told the truth as it was, not as he wished it had been. The slap, the words, the pot, the flash of anger, the scream, the regret that rose like a flood and would not recede. When he finished, a bird called from the tree, a small sound in a heavy yard. Mama Grace's turn came. She stared at the ring of faces and, for a heartbeat, looked simply tired. He is my son, she said. He acted like a stranger. The words shook. Pride tried to steady them. She stopped. The village leaned in. I wanted to protect our name, she continued, softer. Perhaps I became the danger. A murmur moved like grass in wind. Nkairu spoke last. She did not waste sentences. I have been mocked, she said. I have been called names that do not belong to me. I have eaten bitterness and answered with prayer. I will not lie this morning. My husband wronged his mother. My mother-in-law wronged me. Today, I am asking for a future that does not look like yesterday. An elder who kept few words nodded once. Another stroked his grey beard, considering. Arguments blossomed, punishment, apology, amends. The council finally settled on three things: a formal apology from Chinedu to his mother and the elders, a public end to the slander against Nkairu's pregnancy, and a week of quiet in the village. No gossip, no gatherings for the sake of retelling, as if silence itself could be medicine. Chinedu knelt before his mother. I am sorry, he said, and the steadiness in his voice almost broke him. I chose anger when I should have chosen wisdom. I will carry this shame and turn it into change. Mama Grace looked down at his bowed head. The village watched for witchcraft or forgiveness or something in between. She reached out and placed her palm on his hair, the same palm that had once soothed fevers and sent him to school with a blessing. Her eyes shone. Stand, she said, and for the first time in many moons, her voice held no iron. Do not pour fire again. He rose. The elders dismissed them. The crowd peeled away into little clusters. Some shook their heads, some smiled at nothing, some hurried off to be the first to obey the week of silence by whispering at home. At the compound gate, Mama Ijeoma waited with a calabash of water. She tipped a few drops onto the earth. For cooling, she said. For sense. Nkairu smiled, small and grateful. Thank you. The day turned. Work resumed. Chickens resumed their important strut. But under the ordinary, something had shifted. A few women greeted Nkairu with true warmth. A few men greeted Chinedu with cool eyes, measuring him, deciding whether his apology was strength or weakness. Children stared at Mama Grace's scarf and then, surprisingly, came to help her shell groundnuts without being asked. At dusk, Chinedu and Nkairu sat under the mango tree. The air smelled of rain that had not yet fallen. The baby rolled under Nkairu's palm and kicked once, clear and brave. Chinedu closed his eyes. I have brought you storms, he said. You have brought me yourself, she answered. The rest we will carry. He leaned his head against her shoulder. Somewhere down the road, a radio sang a love song that had seen too much. Fireflies stitched small light into the dark. For the first time in a long time, the night did not press so hard. Across the compound, Mama Grace watched from her doorway, hand hovering near her scarf as if the pain there could teach her something her pride never had. She lowered herself onto the bench, looked up at the purple sky, and exhaled a long, complicated breath, the kind that makes room for regret and the first thin shoots of mercy. In houses up and down the street, the village argued with itself in quiet hearts. Was this madness or mending? Was it witchcraft or awakening? The week of silence had begun, but questions do not obey decrees. They settle and wait and turn slowly into answers. For now, under a low-breathing evening, three lives held their places. A mother measuring her own reflection, a husband learning a new kind of strength, and a wife who had refused to bend into someone else's definition. Tomorrow would come carrying its tests. But tonight, there was air enough for hope. The week of silence held the village like a soft decree. Radios hummed lower, quarrels cooled at their edges, and even the goats seemed to pick their way more gently across the road. On the fifth night, rain returned, not loud, not angry, just steady enough to rinse the air and wrap the compound in privacy. Nkairu woke to a deep ache that did not feel like the old blade. This one gathered itself and pushed from the center, purposeful, rhythmic, as if a drum far away was calling her name. She inhaled and felt the answer inside. Now. Adiz, she whispered. Her friend was already on the mat near the door, keeping vigil these days without being asked. It's time. Adiz's eyes flashed awake. I'll call Aya Ozyamar. The midwife arrived with her lamp's gold circle and that calm that turned panic into steps. She washed, prayed under her breath, and looked squarely at Nkairu. Your son heard your voice the other night and turned, she said. He knows the door now. We will open it with patience. Chinedu hovered, palms cold, heart hot. What can I do? Hold the world steady, the midwife said. When she looks at you, let her see that nothing will fall. He nodded, swallowed, and took his place at Nkairu's shoulder. She gripped his hand through the next swell. Pain rolled like a hill and she climbed, over and over. Breath and will the only tools she carried. Between the hills, there were small, startling moments of clarity. She noticed the mango leaves brushing the window. She noticed Adiz's thumb rubbing circles on her wrist. She noticed, most of all, the way Chinedu's eyes kept saying I am here. Outside, the rain thickened and then thinned, as if listening. Inside, time lost count. Good, Aya Ozyamar murmured. Again. Look at me. Yes, like that. A stronger wave rose. Nkairu rode it, teeth clenched, a sound pressed into her throat and then released. The room tilted into focus. Push now, the midwife said, voice a rope. Push for the voice you prayed with. Push for the child who answered. Nkairu pushed. The world narrowed to a single bright point. Then, release. A wet, urgent slip, followed by a heartbeat of silence so complete it frightened the walls. The cry that broke it was fierce and full, not a question but a declaration. I have arrived. It rang across the room and out into the lane like a bell you didn't need permission to ring. Chinedu burst into tears he hadn't planned for. Adiz laughed and wiped her face violently, as if wiping away a lie the world had told too long. The midwife worked deftly, humming the old tune about water finding its level. He is strong, she said, placing a small, warm miracle on Nkairu's chest. Nkairu stared, breath hitching. The child blinked, mouth searching, fist curled like a promise. Dark curls clung to a round head. A tiny line above the brow gave him an expression of serious wonder. He was utterly himself and yet the answer to 1,000 prayers. Chinedu, Nkairu whispered. Yes, he managed, voice gone. He touched his son's foot with a finger that shook. The little toes flexed around it. He laughed, an odd, hiccuping sound, and bent his head. Thank you, he said to the ceiling, to the floor, to God. In the doorway, a shadow lingered. Mama Grace, drawn by a cry she had longed for and feared. She stood clutching her scarf, face a knot of pride, pain, and the sudden, humiliating knowledge of being wrong. The midwife saw her and, without turning her head, said, Come, mother. There is room for you too. Mama Grace took one halting step into the light. The baby fussed, then settled, as if the room itself had made a decision about mercy. Welcome, the midwife whispered to him, and the rain, as if satisfied, softened into a lullaby. Morning laid gold on the compound wall. Word traveled anyway, silence or not. By noon, the village knew. The belly that had been mocked had released a cry. Some smiles warmed, some mouths tightened. A few people, who had invested heavily in the old story, looked around for a new sentence to hide in. Mama Grace sat on the bench by the doorway, the scarf still covering the tender skin on her shoulder. She watched the stream of small kindnesses, eggs at the threshold, a bundle of plantain, a folded note, we are sorry for our mouths. She did not know what to do with them. Her hands, which had always known how to stir a pot and argue a case, fluttered in her lap like birds with nowhere to land. She could feel the villagers' eyes on her when she went to the borehole. Some were sharp. Some were simply curious. One woman murmured, "God is patient," and it wasn't clear if it was an accusation or a benediction. Back in the compound, she lingered near the doorway, listening to the tiny snuffling sounds the baby made in sleep. Adiz moved in and out, a soft guard, not unkind, not inviting. When the baby squeaked, Mama Grace stepped forward involuntarily. "He's awake," she announced to no one, as if she had discovered sunrise. Nkairu looked up from her mat. Fatigue had softened her features in a way that made them more beautiful. She studied her mother-in-law calmly. "Will you hold him?" she asked. The word struck like a match in a dry room. Mama Grace blinked. "Me." "You are his grandmother," Nkairu said, adjusting the wrapper and lifting the small bundle with the competence of someone who had already learned a new universe in 8 hours. Mama Grace's hands rose and stopped, rose again. She sat and received the child like a fragile verdict. He looked at her with the unfocused seriousness of the brand new. In his face, she saw nothing that accused her and everything that required her. Tears surprised her. She tried to hide them, clumsy with pride even now. "Sure," Nkairu said gently, and Mama Grace startled. "Is she comforting me?" The baby puckered and then settled against her. His weight was not much, but it drew something heavy out of her. Stubbornness, the need to be right, the old anger baked into the corners of her voice. She began, then faltered, then began again. "I wronged you." The words came out in pieces. "I called you names that were hungry for your dignity. I tried to cleanse what God had not called dirty. I do not know how to take these things back, but I will try." Nkairu's eyes glazed. She nodded once, the kind of nod that you understand only if you have ever chosen peace when revenge would have been easier. "We will build something different," she said. From the doorway, Adiz looked away quickly, pretending to count yams. Later, when Mama Grace walked to the market for fresh leaves, people stepped aside. Some offered a quiet greeting. One woman, who had clapped her hands loudly on the day of humiliation, ducked her head and mumbled, "Forgive my mouth." Mama Grace, to her own surprise, said, "May none of our mouths ruin our children's lives." It sounded like a prayer and a lesson learned too late. On her way home, she passed the almond tree and the elders' bench. The oldest man lifted 2 fingers in a tiny salute. She stood there a second, wanting to explain everything and knowing explanations were only stones thrown at a river already moving on. At the gate, she paused by the mango tree, touched the soil where the wooden spoon slept, and let out a long breath that left her lighter and ashamed, a necessary sadness you must walk through to reach the next door. Chinedu did not leave the compound for 2 days. He changed nappies with the seriousness of a man repairing a bridge. He learned to sway when the baby fussed and not to panic when the cry opened into a full-throated protest. He built a cradle out of Iroko wood, plain, strong, smooth to the touch, sanding it until dawn while the house slept. He apologized so often that Nkairu finally touched his mouth and said, "Bring me tea instead." He also went to the elders' square and stood where he had stood before. "I poured water I should have set down," he said, bowing. "I have apologized to my mother, but I ask the elders to teach me how to mend a fence I broke with my head." The oldest elder shrugged a little. "Hold your tongue," he said, "and your temper. Repair the gate. Visit those whose mouths you made heavy with gossip. Turn your apology into food." Chinedu nodded and did what was said. He mended hinges, patched a neighbor's leaking roof, fixed a bench at the palm wine shed. He stopped to greet people who looked away. He greeted them again the next day. Slowly, the air around his name changed temperature. At church on Sunday, he asked to speak briefly. The congregation buzzed. Announcements were for harvest and choir practice, not for men bleeding publicly. He stood anyway. "I let anger choose for me," he said, voice steady. "It nearly burned the people I love. If any of my actions made your mouth sin against my wife, I take that sin back and own it myself. If any of your words made my mother harden her heart, I take those words back and put them on my tongue to carry." There was a stillness that did not feel like judgment. After the service, A few men clapped him on the shoulder with that reserved approval men prefer. A few women smiled at Nkairu as if to say, "We see you, not just your story." Mama Grace sat 3 rows back, scarf neat, eyes shining and then not. That evening, as the baby drowsed, Chinedu knelt before Nkairu, not as a performance, not for the village, but for the woman who had held the center when he had let go. "I am learning to be the kind of man our son can copy," he said. "It is late, but not too late." Nkairu traced his jaw with a finger. "He already looks at you like the ceiling of the world," she said. "Just stand where you are. The rest will be work, and we know how to work." He laughed, startled by joy, and kissed his family as if the kiss itself could build walls around them. Not to shut people out, but to keep inside the warmth they had fought so hard to make. News has a way of weaving itself into myth before supper. "The cursed womb birthed the heir," someone whispered near the cassava mill, and the phrase stuck like palm oil on cloth. It traveled, to the barber, to the borehole, to the school gate. People repeated it with different punctuation: mockery, awe, relief, embarrassment. The elders announced a naming ceremony would be held simply, with the care the week of silence demanded. "We will not dance on anyone's wounds," the oldest declared. "But we will name what God has done." On the day, the compound filled with a gentle crowd. No loud drums, just a gan-gan tapping a heartbeat and women ululating softly from the edges. Mama Ijeoma arrived early with a calabash and palm oil for the child's palm, as promised months ago. She lifted the tiny hand and tapped a drop onto it. "So that his words will be seasoned," she murmured. "So that he will not waste them." "What shall we call him?" the pastor asked. Nkairu looked at Chinedu. They had whispered about names at night for years, not daring to commit any to air. Now, confidence came surprisingly easy. "Chizaram," she said. "God answered my prayers." The name rippled through the crowd, and people nodded, as if they had expected to hear it all along. One of the men who had laughed loudest at the market the day of humiliation cleared his throat and stepped forward with a small bag of rice. "For the child," he said, not meeting anyone's eyes. "And for the mouth that eats too quickly." Laughter bubbled, kind this time, not sharp. A teenage boy lifted his phone, thought better of it, and put it away. He watched with his eyes instead. When Mama Grace walked by, he whispered, "I'm sorry," in that sideways way boys apologize. She surprised herself by patting his head like a mother and saying, "Use your eyes more than your phone. They remember better." After the prayers, as people drifted out, the gossip that would have exploded into fireworks lit itself softly and went out. There was nothing left to argue about. A child had chosen the most ordinary solution to a spectacular rumor. He had simply arrived. At dusk, the sky turned mango and purple. Chinedu stood under the almond tree holding Chizaram to his shoulder, swaying to a song he didn't know he knew. Men gathered around him, hands in pockets, pretending they were there to discuss roofing sheets. "Fine boy," one said, and the others grunted their agreement as if rating a good harvest. Across the yard, women gathered around Nkairu. They asked for details the way women do, practical, respectful, laced with laughter that feeds strength. Nkairu told the truth in short, clear sentences. When the last guest left, the compound felt wider, as if the walls had leaned back. The week of silence ended itself without a bell. A week later, Nkairu tied Chizaram to her back with a wrapper and went to the market. She did not choose a dramatic day. She chose the day she needed pepper, kerosene, and thread. The sun was polite, the road was dusty, and her heart beat calm and present, like a drum at practice. Adiz walked beside her carrying a small basket. "Are you ready?" she asked, half teasing. "I was ready the day they laughed," Nkairu said. "I just had to wait for the world to catch up." At the market gate, the woman who sold oranges, one of the first to joke months ago, looked up, froze, and then smiled with an awkwardness that made her look like a schoolgirl. "Auntie Nkairu," she stammered, "how much for your boy if I wanted to buy him?" It was the old, affectionate joke people used with babies. It worked because it admitted you possessed something priceless. "You cannot afford him," Nkairu replied, and the way she smiled told the woman her apology had been received. As they crossed into the aisles, people straightened. Some bowed their heads. A few clapped quietly, a sound like rain beginning. No one blocked her path. No one whispered loud enough to coarsen the air. Phone screens stayed down. At Mama Igioma's stall, the older woman spread her arms. "Bring my grandson," she commanded. Nkairu untied the wrapper. Chizaram blinked at the brightness, then yawned as if the market were old news. Mama Igioma pressed her forehead to his and prayed without moving her lips. "Remember kindness," she seemed to say. "It will make you strong in ways muscle cannot." They bought pepper. They bought thread. At the kerosene stand, the attendant capped the bottle too tightly and then loosened it for Nkairu with a flourish, as if he had just made up for a year of being unhelpful. Little reparations like this followed her from stall to stall. Near the fabric seller, the boy who had once lifted his phone in her face stood up as she approached. "Auntie," he said, sincere, "you are finer in real life than in video." It was clumsy, but brave. "Use your eyes," she replied, echoing Mama Grace. "They see more." They passed the spot where the bucket had stood, where pride and fear had nearly stripped her bare. The ground there looked ordinary. She let it be ordinary. Her victory did not need confetti. It needed thread and pepper and a walk made without flinching. On the way home, they stopped by the elders' square. The old man with the polished stick nodded. "The story finished itself," he said. "It taught itself," Nkairu answered. At the compound gate, Chinedu waited, pretending he had just happened to be passing. "How was the market?" he asked, trying and failing not to grin like a boy. "Prices are high," Nkairu said. "Respect is cheap when it's real." He took the bag from her, and the baby from her back. Chizaram stretched and settled into his father's arms as if he had invented the posture. On the veranda, Mama Grace sat with a bowl of egusi seeds. She looked up, met Nkairu's gaze, then the baby's, then her son's. "Come," she said softly. "Let me roast these. We will eat and talk about names to add to Chizaram's. Praise names he will grow into." They went in. The house smelled like new soup and new chances. That night, after the lamps were out, Nkairu lay awake for a few minutes and listened to the layered music of her life. The fan ticking, the baby's small breaths, Chinedu's heavier ones, and Al somewhere rehearsing a sermon. She remembered the market's eyes, the weight of a bucket being removed from a hand, the midwife's rope of a voice. She remembered the girl she had been at the start of all this. Hopeful, then hurt, then stubborn, then steady. She touched the sleeping child's foot. "Thank you," she whispered to the dark, to the God who had not rushed and had not forgotten. In the next room, Mama Grace turned in her sleep and muttered a prayer of her own, less polished than before, more true. In the morning, life would come with its small tests, spilled oil, a stuck drawer, a careless comment at the well. But the big test had already given its result. When Kairu walked through the market, women bowed not to her pain or her victory, but to the work it took to cross from one to the other without getting lost. Somewhere, a boy lifted his phone, thought better of it, and looked with his eyes instead. Somewhere, an elder sharpened a proverb into gentleness. Somewhere, a woman decided not to throw a stone at a story still unfolding. And in a small, ordinary house rinsed by last night's rain, a family learned the quiet art of beginning again. The end.